Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel David Breuer, Commander 18th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, and this is the second of two videos that I wanted to do tonight, specifically addressing the Omicron variant of coronavirus. I'm going to use some information here, and I want to be very careful in stating, I am using information directly from the World Health Organization and directly from the Center for Disease Control. I don't want that to be mistaken as the Air Force's official party line. That was my last video, and I want to be very clear about that. This is me doing my very best to take the information that's put forth by what I would consider to be two of the most credible sources for coronavirus information in the world, the CDC, the WHO, chew up some of that information and relay it to you, the Airmen of 18th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, in a format that's hopefully a little bit easier to digest. Because again, I want to keep you informed, but I want you to be able to focus on living your life, fixing our jets, and getting on with it. I don't want you to be worried about this per se. I need you to wear your masks. I need you to social distance. I need you to get booster shots, but I don't need you staying up all night worrying about this. So I'm going to do my best to communicate what I think is the most important ideas from some of these well-researched medical sites. All right, I'm going to lean heavily on a PowerPoint presentation from the World Health Organization, and it's already a couple days old. This is from the middle of December. I think it's got a lot of good information that helps communicate some of the key ideas to help us understand exactly what is Omicron, why is it different from the Delta variant, how is it different, and most importantly, what can we do about it? I always want to be pragmatic. I always want to come back to what are we going to do about it today? All right, the current global situation. I'm just reading right off of the COVID-19 dashboard on the World Health Organization. As of today, there have been 293,750,692 confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world. And as of today, 5,454,131 deaths. On island, the total number of deaths has been, or is currently 398 deaths on the island of Okinawa alone. All right, let's talk about how viruses evolve. All viruses evolve over time. The more a virus circulates, the more it's going to get a chance to evolve. Because there are such large pools of unvaccinated people, the coronavirus got a chance to evolve, mutate, evolve again, mutate, and continue to survive because we could not stop that forward flow. And I hope that that's a lesson that humanity kind of learns. We need to cut it off before it gets to this point. Most changes have little or no impact on the virus's properties or behavior. However, some changes to the SARS-CoV-2 have led to the emergence of variants that may affect, importantly, its virus transmissibility, its disease severity and disease presentation, like what are the effects, and concerningly, the effectiveness of vaccines, therapeutics, diagnostic tools, or public health and social measures. SARS-CoV-2 variants have been identified, and some have been characterized by the World Health Organization as variants of interests or variants of concern. There's a graphic here that I think is helpful. If you imagine a virus of a ball covered in a bunch of spikes, and those spikes are kind of like keys that open up the locks to our cells, or you can think of our killer T cells, our killer immune cells, as basically cracking open the shell of a virus. When these protein spikes change, it necessitates a change in our immune response. And if enough of those protein spikes change, it may be able to dodge or evade our response to some degree. Let's just run through the history. On 26 November, the World Health Organization designated Bravo 11529 a variant of concern because of preliminary evidence of a detrimental change in the COVID-19 epidemiology. As a variant of concern, it was named Omicron. Omicron has a large number of mutations, including more than 30 genetic mutations in the spike proteins. The spike protein of SARS-CoV-2 is targeted by some of the currently approved COVID-19 vaccines Mutations in the spike protein therefore need to be closely monitored because it may affect how well vaccines prevent against it. Some mutations have previously been associated with increasing transmissibility and make it easier for the virus to bind and attach to cells. And just a reminder of how those viruses work. Remember, they bind to a cell, crack open the cell, insert their own ribonucleic acid, and basically hijack our ribosomes, hijack the factory portion of our cells that produce proteins. They basically hijack that factory and change that factory. Instead of making the proteins that we need to live and survive, that cell is hijacked to just become a production factory for more viruses. And so this is of primary concern in the mutations. When we talk about our current knowledge of the Omicron variant, we're going to look at transmissibility, and it's not yet clear whether Omicron is more transmissible, whether it causes more or less severe disease compared to other variants, or impacts the effectiveness of current COVID-19 vaccines. I would like to pause here briefly and reference some of the material that I've gotten from the CDC that has been published since the time of this PowerPoint. Okay, I want to share this as I think that sharing the information will help promote awareness, and of equal importance, help promote the behaviors we're looking for, which is adherence to mask wear, keeping each other safe, and promoting the activity of getting a booster shot. As always, I want to be very careful about citing what is a peer-reviewed study and what is not. I want to be very careful about saying exactly where I'm getting this information. This is from a paper published 23 December, so after this PowerPoint, but it's titled Enhancing Readiness for Omicron, Technical Brief and Priority Actions for Member States of the World Health Organization. As of 22 December, the Omicron variant has been identified in 110 countries across all 6 WHO regions. There is consistent evidence that Omicron has a substantial growth advantage over Delta. It is spreading significantly faster than the Delta variant in countries with documented community transmission, with a doubling time of 2 to 3 days. That means in unvaccinated populations, the virus tends to double the number of infected persons every 2.5 days. That leads to very drastic spread. I do want to be careful about the applicability here. We have a drastically different population than most in that we have upwards of 99% vaccinated members in our sample population here. So while this is not directly applicable, I do think that it's important context, and I want to be very careful about that. I will post the link to this in the description. Early data from South Africa, the United Kingdom, and Denmark suggest a reduced risk of hospitalization for Omicron compared to Delta. I want to be careful about not overplaying this. There's still a lot that we do not know, but there is some sign that there are slightly fewer hospitalizations, and thank God, because the spread rate of this is much, much higher. At present, there is no peer-reviewed evidence to determine vaccine efficacy for Omicron. However, results from the United Kingdom indicate a significant reduction in vaccine effectiveness against Omicron compared to Delta after 2 vaccine doses. However, there was a much higher effectiveness 2 weeks after a Pfizer-BioNTech Comirnaty booster, which was slightly lower compared to that against Delta. I wanted to read one piece of information that gave me some hope about the efficacy of booster shots very specifically. Let me read this in its full context so as not to be misquoted. Another analysis by researchers at Imperial College of London compared the hazard ratio of symptomatic infection with Omicron compared to Delta for different vaccine schedules. 2 doses of Pfizer-BioNTech Comirnaty or AstraZeneca with or without a mRNA vaccine booster based on PCR confirmed symptomatic infections in England, UK, excluding international travelers and matching by day, age, sex, region, and ethnicity. The preliminary results suggest a higher risk of infection for Omicron compared to Delta after 2 doses and 3 doses of vaccine, using the estimated vaccine effectiveness against Delta. This elevated hazard ratio translates into estimates of vaccine effectiveness against symptomatic infection for Omicron between 0 and 19% following 2 doses, but, and I thought this was key and gives me some hope, between 54% and 77% after a booster dose. So I want to highlight that as it is completely on track with the Department of Defense guidance, and I think vaccines and booster shots in general look to be our single best tool in trying to eliminate the spread of Omicron variant. We already talked about transmissibility. Going on to reinfection. Preliminary evidence suggests there may be an increased risk of reinfection with Omicron. However, information is very limited. Detection, thankfully, diagnostic tests included PCR and antigen detection continue to detect infection with Omicron. And that's key because knowing where the virus is can help us contain and eliminate spread. While the characteristics of Omicron are still being studied, evidence shows that COVID-19 vaccines are still effective to protect against severe disease due to current circulating SARS-CoV-2 variants, including Delta and including Omicron. Going to the next slide. 3 key properties of a variant are likely to influence the overall threat from it. This is its virulence, its ability to cause severe disease, its transmissibility relative to circulating variants, and Omicron in the populations where it's taken root has now superseded Delta as the key variant of concern, and its ability to evade immune responses prior to infection and vaccine therapeutics. Going on to slide 8 here, a global approach to monitor and assess SARS-CoV-2 variants, including Omicron, monitoring and surveillance. And I think that this is still worth knowing because while this is the strategy by the World Health Organization, you will see a microcosm of this inside our wing, inside our squadron. Monitoring and surveillance, seeing how the transmission, how the disease characteristics are changed, and the impact of vaccines, and frankly, the effectiveness of public health measures are critical for us. Evidence and assessment, seeing how well those actions prevent the spread or contain the spread, and then policy. We have a very well-regimented system here of command staff directives and force health protection measures that we rise up and down depending upon the threats. Going down to slide 9, I will say that the rough parallels here on Okinawa and Kadena Air Force Base, we have CUOPS, and CUOPS in coordination with the JICRIC, they help feed us the information. We chop a couple of guys from our regular missions to focus squarely on Omicron, on COVID-19, so that they can do the homework for us and we can keep the wheels turning on the jets. Going down to slide 10, and I think this is still spot on, like 100%. Preventative measures effectively reduce the risk of COVID-19, including Delta and including Omicron. Physical distance, at least 1 meter. We've been saying 2 meters, 6 feet. I still think that's best. Wear a good fitting mask. The face shield or a mask that barely fits is much, much less effective. I've done some homework, and I'll read a couple passages that gave me some hope about some studies with masks as soon as I finish this slide. Open windows to improve ventilation, like, hey, in the AMUs, get those doors open. If you're riding the truck, roll down the windows so long as you can still hear each other think. Try to get that air circulating through. Studies have shown ventilation helps prevent the spread. Avoid crowds. Avoid crowds anywhere. Wash hands frequently. I will note that fomites, the transmission of the disease from solid objects, appears to be a lesser threat than aerosol, than the vapors. However, washing your hands is still a critical part because if those aerosols settle, those droplets, those globules of a virus from people's breath, from a sneeze, if you touch something and then touch your mucous membrane, like an eye inside of your nose or your lips, you can still communicate the disease. You can still pick up the disease that way. Make sure we cough or sneeze into a bent elbow or tissue and get vaccinated. Get your booster shots. I think we can reasonably expect an ongoing schedule in the indefinite future. And that still is shown to be one of the most effective things we can do. While I'm on this slide, I'm going to pause for a moment and grab some of that research that I was mentioning with regards to mask wear. This is from the Center for Disease Control, and it's titled "The Science Brief: Community Use of Masks to Control the Spread of SARS-CoV-2." A couple excerpts that I highlighted when I read this. Multi-layer cloth masks block the release of exhaled respiratory particles into the environments. Multi-layer cloth masks can block 50 to 70% of these fine droplets and particles and limit the forward spread of those that are not captured. Upwards of 80% blockage has been achieved in human experiments with cloth masks, in some studies performing on par with surgical masks as barriers for source control. A study of an outbreak on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, an environment notable for congregate living quarters and close work environments, found that the use of face coverings on board was associated with a 70% reduced risk of infection. In a study of 124 Beijing households with more than one laboratory-confirmed case of SARS-CoV-2 infection, mask use by the index patient and family contacts before the index patient developed symptoms reduced secondary transmission within the household by 79%. A study examining SARS-CoV-2 secondary attack rates among 8 public K-12 schools and districts in Massachusetts, 70 schools with greater than 330,000 enrolled students, during the 2020 to 2021 school year found an unadjusted secondary attack rate of 11.7% for unmasked versus 1.7% for masked interactions. That's a difference of almost a factor of 6, almost, from 11.7 to 1.7% with masks, a huge drop-off. A retrospective case control study from Thailand documented that among more than 1,000 persons interviewed as part of a contact tracing investigations, those who reported having always worn a mask through high-risk exposures experienced a greater than 70% reduced risk of acquiring infection compared with persons who did not wear masks under these circumstances. Again, I always want you to do your own homework, but again, this is from the Center for Disease Control. I will leave the link in the description, but those were some studies, although relatively recent, that gave some hope and that gave some quantifiable benefit to mask wear. I know it's uncomfortable. I don't like doing it any more than anybody else, but I'm confident that it helps decrease the spread, and that's exactly what we need to do here and now. On slide 11 here, a robust response to Delta helps response to Omicron and other SARS-CoV-2 variants. And I think the point here is that all the stuff that we learned over the last 2 years is not lost just because we have a new variant. These measures will continue to keep us and people safe, but they have to be implemented, they have to be followed in order to be effective. We should continue to implement effective public health and social measures to reduce COVID-19 circulation. We should continue to increase vaccination coverage, continue to increase vaccinations, and we should continue to enhance the surveillance and let the World Health Organization and CDC work on sequencing efforts to better understand SARS-CoV-2 variants, including Omicron. On slide 12, it talks about a risk-based approach to international travel in the context of SARS-CoV-2 variants. I don't want to spend too much time here because we just got a 72-page paper from 5th Air Force that details in some great level travel restrictions and ROM requirements and everything else you could possibly want to know about travel and the restrictions for Japan. The first sergeants and myself are reading that cover to cover, highlighting, taking notes. We've already sent that out to everybody, but because it's so long, because it is so thick, we want to take some care to extrapolate and basically chew up and spit out the most important parts. Again, we want to make sure you have what you need to know at your fingertips and that you can focus on your life and focus on fixing jets safely. Slide 13, travel risk mitigation measures that may be implemented. I think for us, you can reasonably expect continued ROM requirements, continued testing requirements, and I think that's going to constitute continued vaccination requirements. I think it's going to continue to constitute the bulk of our preventative measures there. Team, I just want to recap briefly some of the key points about Omicron. We don't know a whole lot about it. We have seen very high rates of transmission. In countries with large unvaccinated populations, the rate of infection has doubled every 2.5 days. That probably won't be exactly the same here because of the high rate of vaccination. However, we can reasonably expect a very fast increase. In countries where it has propagated without stop, it seems to have burnt itself out inside of 3 to 4 weeks. And so I'm saying, my point there is that this will not last forever. The way in which it is transmitted, however, does not appear to have changed. COVID is transmitted, number one, through the inhalation of very fine respiratory droplets and aerosol particles. Number two, the deposition of respiratory droplets and particles on exposed mucous membranes in the mouth, nose, eye, or direct splashes in the sprays. Number three, touching mucous membranes with your hands that have either been soiled with other viruses. All right. Team, I just want to keep it very straightforward, very simple. Please, wear your masks, social distance, get your booster shots, keep calm, and fix jets. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, call your friends and family back home. We're going to get through this together. Have faith. All right. God bless each and every one of you. I'll leave links to all the source material in the description, and I'll see you out there on the flight line. Take care and good night.